Hello, I'm bassoonist Michael Burns from michaelburnsbassoon.com. Today I want to talk about how we can control our intonation on the bassoon and also the technique of voicing, which I use as one of my primary methods. Intonation on the bassoon, unfortunately, is fairly fixed. There's not a lot that we can do. There's no good place to push in or pull out. It used to be thought that perhaps doing the vocal in and out would help, like might be done on a brass instrument with a tuning slide, but that actually, rather than making the bassoon flatter as you pull it out, just actually makes the bore not work properly and the distance between notes change. So it basically makes it just out of tune as opposed to overall flatter. So one thing that we can do is we can get different lengths of vocal. So they tend to be numbered. So the larger the number is, the longer the vocal is. One thing to note is that not all brands have a universal sizing that is the same. So for example, a Heckel number 2 vocal is approximately equal to the length of a Fox number 3 vocal. So just to be aware of whichever brand that you're using, that the numbers within that brand will definitely lead to lengthening or shortening, but if you switch from one brand to another, there may be some other adjustments. Other things that can adjust the intonation, when we're playing in our lowest register, we all learn that we need to lower our lower jaw when we're playing maybe from about low F down to the low B flat. One needs to be careful if we try to do that higher up above the staff, because that actually leads to issues, which I'll be talking about in another video at some point. But the method that I think is the best one to try and employ for intonation on the bassoon is what is often thought of as voicing. And it's thought of as voicing because we're going to employ some of the same techniques that we might when we are speaking or using language or, of course, singing. So first of all, I want to think about, in many languages, especially the Romance languages, when they think of the vowels, they think of what can sometimes be called pure vowels. A, E, O, U. In English, none of our vowels are actually pure. All of them are a diphthong. A, I, U. So the A, E, O, U vowels is what I like to think of as my starting point. And we're going to use that as the middle part of how we're forming a note. The beginning part of how we form a note, the consonant, is going to be the tonguing. So we might go ta, te, ti, to, tu, where the T is produced by how the tongue is contacting the reed. And then the vowel sound, which is more often controlled by more of the middle and the back of the tongue as opposed to the front, is what is actually going to make some real differences on the bassoon intonation. So if we want to raise the pitch of a note, then if we think of the reed and our tongue, if we think of the E has the highest, most arched tongue position. Anybody that is switching from clarinet or saxophone is probably very aware of this. For the bassoon, that tends to be on the sharp side for many notes. Occasionally we need to do that to compensate for other pitch things. So E, then A, O, and the middle and back of the tongue, if you think of the front, how it would contact the reed, will be altering. When we speak these, we also make changes to the amount our mouth is open. Of course, if we've formed the embouchure around the reed, then our mouth is not going to be open. So if I was to create those different vowel sounds, what you would see is the jaw position is changing and a little bit with the musculature, but you're not going to see my lips come away from the reed, because that won't work on the bassoon. So I use these techniques in order to alter the pitch, but sometimes I need the pitch to be in between two vowels. So it's not A, it's not E, it's I, it's somewhere in between. And that's often when we're doing our fine tuning of pitches, is I'm thinking a little bit of the vowel sound and making sure that I'm able to control things. I actually do find that rather than thinking of the mechanics of tuning, one of the concepts that I would like to bring forth as very important for myself, and that I have found with my students to be important as well, is actually not thinking I am going to raise my tongue or lower my tongue or raise my jaw or lower my jaw or something physical like that, but more that playing in tune is really much more a function of listening to where the correct note should be and then letting our brain send the messages out to try and make adjustments. Now, the bad thing about that is that there are some adjustments that we can make easily and quickly that are not great, such as biting the reed to try and get it up to pitch. But really, when I think of listening to the pitch and audiating it, that is when we are hearing a note, kind of like visualizing is seeing a note in our mind, then we can match that audiated pitch. Now, very briefly, as I wrap up this video, some other ways that we can alter the overall pitch of the bassoon, in addition to a different numbered vocal, is with the length of the reed, the proportions of the amount of the tube of the reed versus the blade of the reed. It tends to be that a longer reed will most often, there are other variables involved, but most often play flatter than a shorter reed. A wider reed will most often play flatter than a narrower reed. A thinner reed will most often play flatter than a thicker reed. So these things actually go together because as the reed is longer, it becomes wider and it also becomes thinner. So those three elements go hand in hand. But there are different ways that we can set things up. What we want to aim is that our reeds and our vocal and the instrument, with a good fingering and a good embouchure, will be more or less in tune, and then the micro adjustments that we make, I would advocate really doing most of, with, as long as we have good ear support, with using the vowels for intonation. That's all I have for today's video on intonation. Happy bassooning.